Chapter 76. The Graham Dukedom was the ruler of Fantasia, one of the three major cities of Midland in the past. During the Holy Empire era, it was a clan that boasted strong power, ruling the entire eastern region where Midland is currently located even after the decline of the Holy Empire. The Graham clan continued to exert a powerful influence, leading the financial and real estate industries of the central continent. Zeke, along with Farrell and Felix, headed to Fantasia to visit this Graham clan. Felix, riding in the carriage, was excited about the prospect of visiting the Graham clan. The Graham clan, Master, this isn't a dream, is it? Zeke clicked his tongue at Felix. We're not going there to play, Felix. But it's the Graham clan, the clan with the most handsome men and beautiful women on the continent. The Graham clan was famous for their outstanding appearance in addition to their wealth and power. There were even rumors that they had the blood of the elf race, which had now disappeared, mixed in their lineage. Zeke looked at Felix with a disapproving gaze. Farrell, who was next to them, said with a good-natured smile, "Ha. The Graham clan's outstanding appearance is quite famous. Not only Felix but everyone who visits the Graham clan has such expectations. Don't be too hard on him, sir." Zeke. Felix nodded in agreement with Farrell and said to Zeke, "See? It's strange that you're so indifferent to this, Master. TSK. Stop talking nonsense and focus on your training." Although Felix was 4 years older than Zeke, their conversation sounded like that of a naive squire and a stern knight. Actually, there was another reason why Zeke didn't have any particular expectations for the Graham clan. I saw quite a bit of the Graham clan in my past life. The Graham clan, who had been involved in the financial industry for generations, fled to the northern continent after the Continental War broke out to avoid the Rom Empire's invasion. They were in charge of supplying war materials from the rear, supporting the northern continent, and in the process, Zeke had quite a few encounters with the Graham clan. They may have a pretty appearance, but if you knew how greedy those misers were, you wouldn't say a good word about them. The Graham clan never invested in anything that would put them at a disadvantage. As a result, in his past life, they first sought refuge in the northern continent, but as the Imperial Army advanced, they later sided with Nirvana to secure their safety. Zeke, who had been betrayed by the Graham clan at the last minute, didn't have good feelings towards them. They're not a clan I'm particularly fond of, but they're certainly good with calculations, so I'll have to use them well. Wow! Felix marveled at the scenery of Fantasia outside the carriage window. If Atlas had a modern sophistication and Mycenae had an ancient elegance, Fantasia had a completely different charm. Wow, Master. This is the first time I've seen a city with so many different races. Fantasia was a transportation hub, connecting to the Northern Alliance in the north and the Central Kingdom in the east. Anyone traveling from the north to the center or from the center to the north would inevitably pass through Fantasia. As a result, with the mixture of various races and cultures, Fantasia developed into a city with a unique and eclectic charm. Cling, 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 cling. In the city square, dwarves were attracting the attention of travelers by performing their traditional dances, and in another area, dwarves were displaying and selling goods they had made themselves. Nagas, a snake-human race rarely seen in other cities, and the mystical bird people were also occasionally seen. Felix gaped at the wondrous sights. Different from Atlas, the carriage passed through downtown Fantasia and headed towards the Graham clan's castle. With Zeke and Farrell, who had clear identities, they were able to enter Graham Castle without difficulty. The problem was that even meeting Duchess Catherine Graham was an obstacle. As a prominent figure in social circles, her schedule was packed, and it wasn't possible to meet her immediately. Farrell returned to the reception room after speaking with the head servant. His expression wasn't good. "It seems the Duchess is very busy, as it's the start of the debutante season. I apologize, Sir Zeke." Zeke nodded at Farrell's words. "Thank you for your efforts, Sir Farrell. I'll try talking from here." Zeke rang the bell to summon a servant. A servant of the Graham clan immediately entered the reception room. "Do you need anything?" Zeke said to the servant, "I'd like to meet His Excellency the Duke." "May I ask what business you have with His Excellency the Duke?" Zeke replied, "Tell him that I'm interested in investing in the Mithril mine." The servant, surprised by the unexpected words, asked back, "My investment in the mine, you say?" Yes. The servant tried to hide his bewildered expression and left the reception room, and exactly 30 minutes later, instead of the Duke, a young man appeared in the reception room. My name is Albert Graham. He seemed to be the banker in charge of investments for the Graham clan. As expected of a Graham blood relative, he was incredibly handsome. Zeke said to Albert, I said I wanted to meet the Duke. Albert replied with a stiff expression, the Duke is away on an external meeting, so I came instead. If it's about investment consultation, you can speak with me. I heard you're interested in investing in the Mithril mine. Albert only said what he wanted to say. Zeke said in a calm voice, I heard that the exploration work for the mineral veins in the northern mountain range is in full swing. That's correct. We've practically found the mineral veins, so if you invest now, you can be guaranteed a stable profit. Zeke grinned and said, that's a bit different from what I heard. I heard that you've been working on mineral exploration for 3 years, but there are no results yet, and the initial investment funds have almost dried up. Albert's eyes trembled slightly at Zeke's pointed words. Zeke inwardly laughed as he looked at Albert. The mithril vein will be discovered around next year. I remember the Graham clan almost went bankrupt before the vein was finally found, and they narrowly escaped. But I didn't know I'd be using this information like this. Albert Graham regained his composure and asked Zeke in a somewhat arrogant voice, what level of investment are you considering? Mine development is an investment that requires a large amount of funds, so we are not currently accepting small investments. Zeke took out a check issued by the Northern Bank from his pocket. Albert's eyes widened as he glanced at the amount on the check, $500,000 gold? Albert was surprised to see Zeke present an amount far exceeding his expectations. Even Farrell and Felix were speechless at the astronomical figure of 500,000 gold. Zeke said to Albert, would this be enough for an investment? Albert, who had been wearing an arrogant expression, took out a handkerchief and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. Oh, of course. Will you be investing the entire amount? That's what I intend to do. Albert's expression completely changed as he received the check. Sir Zeke, would it be all right if I confirm the check with the Northern Bank first? Of course. Albert wrote down the check information and left the reception room for a moment, and 10 minutes later, Albert returned to the reception room with Duke Graham. Duke Graham offered Zeke a handshake. Sir Zeke, I apologize, I've just finished my external meeting and have kept you waiting. My name is Brian Graham. As rumored, Duke Graham was incredibly handsome. Zeke knew he was in his 50s, but judging from his appearance alone, he looked no older than 30. After shaking hands with Duke Graham, Zeke asked Albert, who was standing behind him, have you confirmed the check? It's been confirmed. There's no problem with the investment. With the Graham clan short on funds, Zeke, who brought a large sum of 500,000 gold, was like a savior. Duke Graham immediately drew up an investment contract without delay. By investing 500,000 gold, Zeke was able to secure a 38% stake in the mining project. It was the highest percentage of individual ownership. The Duke's attitude towards Zeke, who became a major shareholder in the mithril mine, was very polite. Sir Zeke, we have other good investment opportunities. Would you like to take a look? Zeke shook his head at the Duke's offer. I have to participate in the upcoming Draker martial arts tournament, so I don't have time to consider other investments. The astute Duke Graham immediately understood Zeke's implication. He smiled at Zeke and said, the Draker martial arts tournament. It's a dream stage for young and capable knights. Come to think of it, there's a way I can help you, Sir Zeke. What kind of help? I'll arrange a meeting with my wife. Catherine, my wife, is well acquainted with the Central Region nobles, so she might have heard some information about this Draker martial arts tournament. It would be a great help if you could do that. Let's have dinner together tonight. My wife will be delighted to have a chance to get to know such an excellent knight as Sir Zeke. After promising to have dinner together that evening, the Duke and Albert Graham left the reception room. They then gave Zeke and his party the best room in the castle and had the most beautiful servants attend to them. Farrell was dumbfounded by the dramatically changed treatment. I never imagined such a method, Sir Zeke. Sometimes, money is the quickest solution, Sir Farrell. Zeke had learned from bitter experience in his past life that although there were things money couldn't solve, there were actually more things it could, and that evening, Zeke and his party were able to meet Catherine Graham at the dinner table. Catherine Graham smiled and greeted Zeke. I've heard a lot about you from the Duke. He says you're the most talked about knight on the continent right now. Catherine Graham, with her gorgeous blonde hair, was the epitome of a Central Region noblewoman. In addition to her glamorous appearance, her every word and gesture exuded the refinement of a Central Region aristocrat. "You flatter me. I still have much to learn." The dinner proceeded formally. Appropriate greetings and polite conversations about various issues on the continent were exchanged. After dinner, Catherine rose from her seat and said, "It would be a shame not to have tea after a meal like this." Duke Graham subtly excused himself, and Catherine, Zeke, and Farrell moved to the tea table on the balcony. Felix stood behind them, guarding their seats. Catherine sipped her tea with an elegant posture and said to Zeke, "I heard you're participating in the Draker martial arts tournament." Zeke nodded. "That's correct. I've heard that the Draker martial arts tournament is different from other competitions, with events that surprise people every time. Do you happen to know what events have been decided for this tournament?" Zeke shook his head. "I haven't heard any news yet." Catherine covered her mouth and smiled slightly. "I see. I'll give you a little hint about what I've heard from others. I'd like to see you achieve good results in the tournament, Sir Zeke." "Lady Catherine." Catherine's eyes widened as Zeke interrupted her. Zeke said to her, "I didn't come here just to hear some simple information." Catherine's eyebrows twitched slightly. "I don't quite understand what you mean, Sir Zeke." "I would like you to help me, Lady Catherine." Zeke didn't beat around the bush and directly conveyed his intentions. Catherine closed her fan and slowly rose from her seat. "It's getting quite late, Sir Zeke. Sir Farrell, I had a lovely time. I hope we can have another pleasant conversation next time." As Catherine flatly expressed her refusal, Zeke said to her, "I want to make a deal." Catherine turned her head to look at him. Zeke slowly opened his mouth. "If I can cure your daughter, Lady Angelina's, illness, would you agree to the deal?" Chapter 77. Catherine's expression hardened at Zeke's words. She said to Zeke in a cold voice, "Sir Zeke, you are truly rude." Catherine's voice was laced with anger. Her daughter, Angelina Graham, was once rumored to be the most beautiful woman on the continent. However, Angelina did not appear in society even after she turned 16, the age for debutantes, and various rumors arose because of this. Rumors spread that she hadn't grown up as beautiful as expected, or that she had contracted a terrible disease that disfigured her face. Since no one had seen Angelina after she turned 10, these rumors were considered somewhat credible. Despite the rumors, no one had ever dared to directly mention Angelina in front of the Graham dukedom, a prestigious and influential clan. Everyone kept silent, avoiding any mention of Angelina Graham's existence. Catherine felt insulted by Zeke and said in a cold voice, "I will remember your rudeness. I would like you to leave the castle now." She explicitly ordered Zeke to leave, even though he had invested a large sum of money in the mine. This clearly showed how sensitive Angelina's situation was to Catherine, but Zeke remained calm and said to Catherine, "If you neglect Lady Angelina's illness any longer, it will become irreversible." Catherine was startled by Zeke's calm voice. She looked at Zeke and opened her mouth. "You speak as if you know what Angelina's illness is." "Yes, I know." Catherine's eyes widened at those words. "All the famous healers on the continent have examined her, but none of them could even figure out what the disease is. Are you saying that you, Sir Zeke, know what it is and can even cure it?" Zeke said to Catherine, "The affliction tormenting Lady Angelina is not an illness, but a curse." Catherine's face turned pale. "A sea curse, you say?" Zeke nodded. "As time passes, blisters appear all over her body, and her skin rots, doesn't it?" Catherine was surprised. How did you?" "At first glance, it seems like an illness, but it can't be cured with ordinary medicine. It's a terrible curse cast with forbidden magic." Tears welled up in Catherine's eyes. "A curse? A curse? You can't be serious. Is there any reason why you think it's not a curse?" "The first person I called when Angelina collapsed was a mage from Nirvana. The Graham clan has many enemies, so we always take thorough measures against curses. Especially with Angelina, who receives a lot of attention, we were even more careful. The Nirvana mage said they couldn't find any traces of a curse on Angelina, so I thought it was just an illness. Zeke shook his head. Curses are closer to shamanism than magic. Many exist in the realm of mystery, difficult to interpret with ordinary magic. Catherine's expression changed completely. Are you saying that you can lift the curse, Sir Zeke? Zeke took out the Bible he had prepared from his pocket. He made the sign of the cross and said, "You must have heard about the curse on the Agamemnon clan." Catherine nodded. "Oh, of course. I recently heard that the curse was lifted. Come to think of it, the newly appointed successor of the Agamemnon clan is. With the help of the sun god, I was able to recover the sacred object of the clan and lift the curse." Catherine felt her heart waver as she looked at Zeke holding the Bible with a pious attitude. She approached Zeke and took his hand. Sir Zeke, see, can you really lift the curse on our Angelina? Everything depends on God's will. But one thing is certain, the more you delay, the more danger Lady Angelina will be in. At Zeke's words, Catherine's face turned pale and she began to pray. Her hands trembling, Zeke held Catherine's hand and recited the Lord's Prayer with her. Farrell, who was behind them, also clasped his hands and prayed with them. Only Felix, the descendant of an arch-paladin, stood blankly, watching the three praying. Farrell and Felix returned to their room, and only Zeke followed Catherine deeper into the castle. They headed towards the North Tower, where outsiders were forbidden to enter. Knights in full plate armor were guarding the entrance to the tower. Catherine held a lamp and began to climb the narrow passage of the tower. We removed all the magic-powered objects because magic is not good for the sick. Perhaps because of that, the passage was pitch black without a single magic lamp. The two climbed the spiral tower and entered the room at the top. As soon as he entered, Zeke frowned at the putrid smell. "It seems the situation is worse than I thought." "Kaya wow!" A sound like a beast roaring came from inside the room. Catherine bowed her head and began reciting the Lord's Prayer again. Zeke held Catherine's hand, calmed her down, and asked, "Is Lady Angelina inside?" Catherine nodded. "The caregiver wipes away the pus and changes the bandages every day. Please ask the caregiver, as well as yourself, to leave." Catherine flinched at Zeke's words but then nodded. She had no choice but to trust Zeke at this point. Soon, the caregiver came out of the inner room and Zeke slowly went inside. The stench he smelled earlier was even stronger. "This is serious." Zeke closed the door and looked towards the bed in the corner of the room. There, tied to the bed, was a monstrous creature in the shape of a human, covered in pus-soaked cloths that couldn't even be called bandages. Kayak. The creature, with its arms and legs tied, screamed, making a sound like scraping metal. "Lady Angelina." Zeke slowly approached the bed. Seeing her condition, it was a wonder she was even alive. The skin all over her body was festering and filled with pus, and her hair had all fallen out, leaving only patches here and there. She was so emaciated that her bones were visible. Zeke tried to talk to Angelina. "Lady Angelina, can you hear me?" Even when Zeke spoke to her, Angelina didn't answer. Then, after a while, she started to move her lips slightly and say something. Zeke slowly brought his ear to her mouth. "Please, kill me." She was living every day in agony worse than death. Zeke, looking at Angelina, took out the Bible from his pocket and placed it on the table next to him. Then he took out the golden mask of Agamemnon from his inventory. He looked at Angelina and took a deep breath. "I hope this works." Zeke knew about Angelina's curse from an incident in his past life. He had once received a mission from his master to track down and capture a shaman who used evil ancient curses, and while interrogating the shaman, he learned that one of the shaman's past requests was to curse the daughter of the Graham clan. At that time, Angelina was already dead, and the shaman didn't reveal his client before he died, so Zeke didn't inform the Graham clan. It was a curse using ancient forbidden techniques. So even if the Graham clan had known, they wouldn't have been able to do anything. Ancient curses required incredibly complex procedures to cast and had a high risk of failure, but once successful, they were that difficult to lift. There were quite a few cases where even the shaman who cast the curse couldn't lift it. In fact, the curse on Angelina was one of those kinds, a curse that causes more suffering the more beautiful the victim is. Who knew such a crazy curse existed? Zeke clicked his tongue and channeled mana into the golden mask. As it had by the lake, the golden mask activated and transformed into a helmet covering his face. The function of the mask is linked to the system. You can use the Grand Purification function. After purifying the curse on the Agamemnon clan, Zeke was able to acquire ownership of the sacred object as the successor of the clan. Since then, he had activated the mask and experimented with it. As a result, he found out that when he simply held the mask, he could only use limited functions, but when he activated it and wore it on his face like this, he could use the Grand Purification skill. Phew. Zeke, wearing the golden mask, slowly approached Angelina. He used the Grand Purification skill and the Area of Effect buff skill, designating Angelina as the target. Wong. Golden waves emanating from his body seeped into Angelina's body. As the golden light enveloped her body, Angelina screamed in agony as if she were on fire. Catherine, hearing a different sound than before, grabbed the doorknob and shook it. Sir Zeke. Are you all right? Angelina. Oh, open the door. Since Zeke had previously cast a spell on the door to prevent it from opening, Catherine couldn't enter. Zeke continued to infuse Angelina's body with the energy of Grand Purification. Sizzle. Suddenly, black smoke rose from Angelina's body. Ugh. A moment later, she convulsed and vomited black liquid from her mouth. Angelina screamed and writhed in agony. The black smoke emanating from her body grew thicker. Zeke watched for a moment, then took out a potion from his inventory and sprayed it on Angelina's body. Sizzle. As the potion touched Angelina's festering skin, new flesh began to grow. It's not enough yet. This time, he took out a top-grade potion, grabbed Angelina's mouth, forced it open, and made her swallow it. Ugh. Angelina tried to resist the potion, but Zeke held her throat and forced her to swallow, making her absorb it. Her body was weakened from being cursed for so long. If he only lifted the curse, her body might go into shock from the sudden change, and her heart could stop. Ugh. Angelina writhed in pain on the bed. Bang. 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 A loud noise came from outside, as if Catherine was having the knights break down the door. Zeke concentrated the power of Grand Purification on Angelina once again. Wong. Angelina's body twisted at a grotesque angle, then she suddenly opened her mouth wide and vomited black smoke. Quack, 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 quack. Unable to withstand it, the source of the curse was expelled from Angelina's body. Zeke immediately used gluttony on the source of the curse. Tist. The black shadow that emerged from Zeke's body swallowed the source of the curse. Soon, a message appeared. You have devoured an ancient cursed wraith. Your consumed mental strength and mana are restored. You have absorbed the ability of the devoured wraith and gained the Curse Reflection A rank skill. By devouring the wraith with gluttony, he gained the Curse Reflection skill, an unexpected gain. Zeke used the Healing Factor skill as an area of effect buff to regenerate Angelina's body. Crack. Heal. Angelina's damaged body began to recover with the power of Healing Factor, since it was the Healing Factor that had even restored the bodies of the Agamemnon clan members who were collapsing from demonic corruption. Angelina's cursed body also returned to its original state. Whoosh. Confirming that even her lost hair had started to grow back, Zeke watched Angelina recover and put the golden mask back into his inventory. Then he slowly approached Angelina. He held her wrist, which was no longer making any sound, and checked her pulse. Fortunately, her pulse was beating. With the curse lifted, Angelina had regained her original form. Zeke took off his coat and covered Angelina's naked body. It was then, bang. The door opened as the scroll magic Zeke had cast wore off. Catherine entered the room with the knights. Catherine, realizing that Angelina was no longer making any sound, covered her mouth. She thought Angelina was dead. Catherine shouted at Zeke, Sir Zeke. How could you do this? My daughter. She had entrusted Angelina to Zeke with a sliver of hope, but she mistakenly thought the worst had happened. Zeke scratched his head and watched Catherine grieve. I missed the timing to tell her that the treatment went well. He was wondering how to explain this situation, as it seemed she wouldn't listen to anything he said. Right now, mother. Chapter 78. Angelina. Catherine rushed to the bed in surprise. Angelina's skin, which had been covered in foul-smelling pus, was now clean. Catherine shed tears of joy at the sight of Angelina's thick, lustrous golden hair. Angelina. Are you all right? Angelina slowly opened her eyes, sat up, and looked at Catherine. Mother, what happened? Catherine hugged Angelina, who had regained consciousness, and sobbed, My daughter. Our Angelina. The Duke, hearing the news, also rushed into the room. He, too, was surprised to see Angelina healed and burst into tears. Zeke quietly left the room, watching Catherine and the Duke. With this, I can consider the Graham clan secured. Early the next morning, Catherine visited Zeke's room. Sir Zeke, how can I ever repay this kindness? Catherine's attitude towards Zeke, who had lifted the curse on Angelina, had completely changed. Zeke grinned at Catherine. "Can you help me with the martial arts tournament?" Catherine smiled and said, "Oh, Sir Zeke, is that all? I will do everything I can for you in the name of the Graham clan." Farrell couldn't believe Catherine, who reigned with absolute charisma in social circles, was acting like this after Catherine left. Farrell approached Zeke and asked, "Did you really lift the curse on Lady Angelina?" Zeke smiled faintly, made the sign of the cross, and said, "It was all the will of the sun god." The central and eastern regions of the central continent were deeply rooted in the influence of the Holy Empire. Most of the nobles were believers in the sun god, and Farrell was also a devout believer. Not only does he have outstanding skills, but he also has such devout faith that he can even dispel curses. He is a role model for all knights. Farrell's respect for Zeke grew even greater later. Zeke and his party were invited to lunch by Catherine, Farrell, and Felix. Upon entering the dining hall, almost had their hearts stop at the sight of an unfamiliar beauty, golden hair cascading like the twilight, fair and smooth skin like porcelain, and mystical purple eyes that seemed to hold stars. She looked like a beautiful goddess from mythology come to life. "Oh God!" Farrell unconsciously called out to God at the sight of her breathtaking beauty. As Farrell was expressing his admiration, Felix was equally shocked. His mind was filled with dozens, hundreds of verses to praise her beauty. No, such words cannot express her beauty. Unlike Felix, who was in despair, Zeke simply bowed his head slightly in greeting without any change in expression. Then, she approached Zeke. "Sir Zeke Draker, Angelina Graham expresses her gratitude to you." The shockingly beautiful woman was none other than Angelina. Completely freed from the curse by Zeke's power, she had regained her original appearance and her stunning beauty. Zeke looked at her and said, "I'm glad to see you in good health." Farrell and Felix looked at Zeke with disbelief. To remain so calm in front of a woman who is like the reincarnation of the goddess of beauty, Sir Zeke is truly a knight among knights. Felix had a slightly different thought from Farrell. "Master, could he be impotent?" Just then, the Duke, Catherine, and the other members of the Graham clan gathered. They approached Zeke, kissed the back of his hand, and expressed their gratitude. Zeke and his party were treated with the utmost hospitality as the most honored guests of the Graham clan. After the meal, Angelina asked Zeke to take a walk with her in the garden. He accepted without much thought and walked with Angelina in the garden. Even just walking with Angelina made the surroundings seem brighter. But Zeke didn't have any particular thoughts. "I don't see any side effects of the curse." He was only worried that there might be remnants of the curse that could cause problems with the deal. As they walked through the garden, Zeke observed Angelina for any signs of discomfort, and she said to him, "How old are you this year, Sir Zeke?" 17. Angelina was inwardly pleased to know that there wasn't much age difference between her and Zeke. 2 years apart is nothing insurmountable. To her, Zeke looked like a prince charming on a white horse, a knight among knights who saved her from a curse with his divine power. Moreover, he had a good clan background, was the best on the continent in terms of skill, and was handsome to boot. Angelina, with a shy expression, calmed her pounding heart and started walking again next to Zeke. Just then, Zeke looked at Angelina and said, "Do you have any idea who it might be?" Angelina was taken aback by the sudden question. "Yes," Zeke said with a cold expression. "The person who might have cursed you." Angelina was startled by Zeke's cold gaze. Then, she was lost in her own thoughts, her heart fluttering with excitement. Could it be that Sir Zeke is angry at the scoundrel who cursed me? Angelina, who had been sick since childhood and had little experience with the world, had a limited understanding of relationships between men and women, confined to the stories of knights and princesses in fairy tales. Therefore, she completely misunderstood Zeke's intentions, who was solely focused on finding the person who cast the curse and bringing the Graham clan completely to his side. Angelina, completely misinterpreting Zeke's words, looked at him and said, "Sir Zeke, I'm fine. It's all in the past. Your feelings for me are enough." Zeke was surprised and asked, "Yes? You're not going to take revenge?" Angelina said with a calm smile, Revenge only breeds more revenge. She thought she was giving a benevolent and beautiful smile, but it actually lost her points with Zeke. Seriously, she almost died from a curse, and she's saying such carefree things. To others, Angelina might be the most beautiful person in the world, but to Zeke, she was nothing more than a victim of a curse who had been screaming in pain. He inwardly clicked his tongue as he looked at Angelina, who seemed oblivious to the world. Tisk tiske. How is she going to survive in this harsh world with that attitude? Oh, I guess it doesn't matter since her clan is rich. Angelina, unaware of Zeke's thoughts, was dreaming of a rosy future with him. Javelin throw. Farrell was surprised by the unexpected choice of event as he listened to Catherine's explanation of the tournament preliminaries. Zeke, who was sitting next to him, asked Farrell, "Sir Farrell, is it strange that javelin throw was chosen as a preliminary event?" Farrell shook his head. "No, it's just that I was surprised because it's such an ordinary and simple event. Although most knights use swords, spears were also one of the basic weapons they learned. Moreover, javelin throw was a popular sport among the Central Region nobles. However, it was a common event that wasn't particularly advantageous to anyone, so it was rarely seen in the Draker martial arts tournament." Catherine, hearing Farrell's words, nodded and said, "As Sir Farrell predicted, it's not just a simple javelin throw." Farrell was surprised by Catherine's words and asked back, "If it's not a simple javelin throw, is it a mounted competition?" Catherine shook her head. "It's a javelin throw, but the distance is different from the usual case. You have to throw it incredibly far." "Incredibly far?" Catherine nodded and replied, "Yes, from what I've heard. The target will be placed beyond the mountain." "Beyond the mountain? Beyond the mountain?" Farrell and Felix exclaimed simultaneously at the absurd event. Zeke nodded as he listened to Catherine's words. "You wouldn't even be able to reach the target without considerable strength and accuracy." Farrell's expression darkened at those words. He said to Zeke, "Sir Zeke, just by looking at the preliminary event, I think I know which clan has secured the majority of the committee votes." "Which clan is it, Sir Farrell?" he said with a serious expression. "It's highly likely to be the Siemens clan." Zeke nodded at Farrell's words. "Siemens, that's certainly possible. Their main clan trait is aura control." "That's right." Moreover, Edward Siemens, the second son of the Siemens clan participating in this tournament, is a spear knight who primarily uses a spear. Edward Siemens. Zeke remembered that knight in his past life. Edward was one of those who led the Imperial Army alongside the Butcher Knight, Abel Draker, and drenched the continent in blood. Unlike his older brother, William Siemens, Edward was known for his cruel nature and eagerness to take the lead. "That madman is entering the tournament, huh?" Then something flashed through Zeke's mind. "Edward Siemens and javelin throw?" Zeke asked Catherine, "Catherine, could you tell me who gave you this information?" "I heard it from the Bronze Clan. One of their elders was selected as a member of the tournament preparation committee this time." Information directly from a committee member, and it's the Bronze Clan. Zeke also knew about the Bronze Clan. They had close ties with the Siemens clan. Zeke got up from his seat. Farrell asked him, "What's the matter, Sir Zeke? Now that we've heard about the preliminary event, shouldn't we practice?" At Zeke's words, Catherine immediately had the servants set up a javelin throw target on a nearby mountain. As soon as the setup was complete, Zeke, Farrell, and Felix prepared their javelins, stood in the open field, and threw them towards the target beyond the mountain. Whoosh. Felix's javelin didn't even reach the mountain, let alone the target, and Farrell's reached the mountain but landed far from the target. Finally, Zeke threw his javelin. Whoosh. The javelin soared high into the sky and landed near the target. Unfortunately, it landed just in front of the target, Farrell said to Zeke with an excited expression. "Sir Zeke, with this, I think we can prepare for the preliminaries in time." However, Zeke only examined the javelin with a serious expression. After a while, he asked Farrell, "Sir Farrell, the other participants who learned about this preliminary event in advance must have started practicing earlier, right?" Farrell nodded. Of course, the other participants must have already finished their practice, focusing solely on javelin throwing. Are there any restrictions on weapons? You used the weapon you registered before the preliminary match. You can't change it in the middle? Usually that's the case, but why do you ask? Zeke looked at the javelin and said, if this javelin could be made longer with a shape more suitable for throwing, and a form that could accurately hit the target, what would you do, Sir Farrell? Farrell looked as if he had been struck on the head. Oh my God, I didn't think of that. To prepare a javelin suitable for long-distance throwing in advance. That's something the Seaman's clan would do. In throwing events, the shape of the weapon could significantly affect the outcome. If someone prepared a javelin specifically for throwing, they would have an advantage in achieving a good score. Ordinary knights would likely focus on throwing the javelin and not think about modifying its shape to improve its performance. Zeke examined the javelin and nodded. Then he approached Catherine, who was sitting in the shade, fanning herself. I have a favor to ask. Ho ho, I'll gladly grant any request from Sir Zeke. Zeke showed Catherine the javelin and explained how he wanted it modified. Catherine tilted her head after hearing Zeke's explanation. Are you sure you want to modify it into that shape? I don't know as much about weapons as you do, but still, this is… Please, I must ask you this favor. Catherine reluctantly agreed at Zeke's firm request. If that's what Sir Zeke wants. Thank you. Zeke turned and looked at the target beyond the mountain. With this, all preparations for the preliminaries are complete. Zeke thought of the Seaman's clan and smiled coldly. No matter what you do, you're still within my grasp. Chapter 79. Zeke and his party returned to Atlas from Fantasia, where the Graham clan resided. By train Lady Catherine decided to gather more information about the martial arts tournament by meeting with the Central Region nobles and then rejoin them in Atlas. Farrell, getting off at the central station, looked around Atlas and said, It's been a while since I've been here since graduating from Valhalla. You were also from Valhalla, Sir Farrell? Yes, it's rare for Central Region nobles to attend Valhalla, but I admired Sir Flaubert so much that I wanted to enroll. It was plausible, considering that Flaubert, who was from Thebes, located in the heart of the Central Region, was a respected knight even among the Central Region nobles. Zeke and his party headed to the mansion in Atlas. When they arrived, a familiar face was waiting for him. Master! It was Liam Stone, who was about to graduate from the academy. Liam, it's been a while. Liam was taller than the last time they met, and his face was much more mature from a distance. He looked as old as Farrell, who was in his 30s. Zeke told Farrell and Felix to rest, and he went out to the garden with Liam. So, how have you been, Liam? Thanks to Master, I was able to complete the academy graduation exam without any problems. I heard you were promoted to purple rank before graduation. Well done. Liam was recognized as a purple rank knight this year and was about to graduate from the academy. Among his peers, the only other one was Reyna, one of the pure-blooded awakened. Zeke asked Liam, I heard you refused the recommendation to enroll in Valhalla with Reyna. Why? Liam pounded his chest and said, I want to be of help to you as soon as possible, Master. Zeke pondered Liam's words. Liam in my past life didn't go to Valhalla and became a red rank knight after gaining experience in the field. Would he grow faster if he gained experience by my side? Zeke, lost in thought, felt a bit pressured by Liam's burning gaze. Well, it wouldn't hurt to have one more squire. Zeke accepted Liam's request. Thank you, Master. He sipped his tea and asked about the other cousins. Leon Conrad ended up taking an indefinite leave of absence from the academy, and Owen Seaman skipped a grade but didn't pass the graduation exam this time. Rena Draker is graduating this time and will be enrolling in Valhalla. Jakin Vardek failed to skip a grade and is now acting like a king among his peers. Zeke nodded as he listened to Liam's report. So Leon finally had his spirit broken. Leon, who had been bullying Liam, had his ear cut off by Zeke. Leon, who had always been the perpetrator, couldn't accept the situation where he became the victim. In the end, he couldn't overcome the shock of what Zeke did to him and chose to take an indefinite leave of absence. I think it's his just deserts. Zeke, who had also suffered at the hands of Leon Conrad in his past life, agreed with Liam's thoughts. Just then, Decker approached them in the garden. "Young master, I brought what you asked for." "Thank you, Decker. Put it here." Decker, following Zeke's gesture, placed a rather large box in front of Liam. Zeke looked at Liam and said, "Liam, this is your promotion gift." Liam was flustered at those words. "A gift? What I've already received is enough, master. Stop grumbling and take it." Liam opened the box with trembling hands, and he was surprised. Master, this is?" Inside the box was a set of new sword and light armor that Zeke had specially ordered from Jelion for Liam. Zeke grinned and said, "I hope it fits you well." Liam was so moved that he couldn't speak properly. He took out the gauntlets, boots, and breastplate from the box and put them on. It fits perfectly, as if it was tailored. It was only natural that Liam liked it, considering it was specially ordered from Jelion based on the armor Liam used in his past life as the mercenary king. Finally, Liam slowly drew the sword from its scabbard. Clank. It was a sword carefully crafted by Jelion, the craftsman of the soul. Liam was captivated by the sword and stared at his reflection in the blade for a while, speechless. "Do you like it, Liam?" Liam, snapping back to reality, immediately knelt before Zeke. "Thank you for your grace. I will strive to not bring shame to your name." Seeing Liam on the verge of tears, Zeke chuckled and said, "I'll look forward to it." Zeke, thinking that the reunion had come to a close, immediately called Felix and established the hierarchy between the two. "Liam is the first subordinate to pledge loyalty to me, and Felix, you are my squire. Felix, you will treat Liam as your senior." Felix was surprised and asked, "What? Master, why am I below him?" Zeke looked at Felix and said, "Do you have a complaint?" "And no, I was just asking." Zeke grinned at Felix. "All right, Felix, I'll give you a chance." What kind of chance?" "If you can defeat Liam, I'll change the hierarchy," Felix said with an excited expression. "Really, master? No takebacks." With that, their spar was decided. A moment later, Felix and Liam stood facing each other. Felix thought he could easily defeat a young boy who had just graduated from the academy. Even if his face looked mature, he took his sword and assumed his stance. Liam also took his stance at the same time. But something was strange. A young boy who just graduated? Wong. A clear ringing sound echoed from Liam's sword. Weak. Liam's powerful sword strike, extending from his characteristically long reach, struck Felix. Ugh! Felix barely blocked Liam's sword and regained his balance. He changed his mind. Damn it, what young boy? Pride and everything else were gone. Felix immediately used the paladin inherited swordsmanship. Weak. Liam retreated from Felix's heavy attack and looked for an opening with an unorthodox attack. Zeke laughed in amusement as he watched their contrasting swordsmanship. It's ironic that Felix, who looks light, uses the classical traditional swordsmanship, and Liam, who looks heavy, uses the unorthodox swordsmanship. As he expected, the two were almost equal in skill. But since their swordsmanship styles were completely opposite, they seemed to be good stimulants for each other. Hiya. Felix, despite his frivolous shouts, skillfully displayed formal sword strikes like the paladin inherited swordsmanship and the Agamemnon golden swordsmanship. Liam, who had slightly underestimated Felix because of his light-hearted attitude, was also inwardly surprised. His sword is solid. It meant his basics were strong. Felix, who had been trained by his grandfather, an arc paladin since childhood and even received an aura transfer, had solid basics. Clang. After exchanging hundreds of blows, both of them were visibly exhausted. Huff, huff. Pant, pant. Their aura and everything else were depleted. The two held their swords and prepared for their final gambit. Weak. It was then Liam, who was charging forward, feinted a strike at Felix's sword, then let go of his sword and rushed into Felix's arms. Gasp. Felix, who had mainly trained in traditional swordsmanship, had never thought of letting go of his sword during a duel. Liam grabbed Felix's legs and used a pancration technique to trip him. Then he grabbed Felix's back and choked him. Gah. Felix, who had never learned pancration techniques, struggled as his carotid artery was pressed, causing him pain. Seeing this, Zeke shouted, "Stop." At Zeke's command, Liam immediately released the chokehold. Cough. Cough. Felix coughed violently and finally regained his senses. Zeke looked at Felix and said, "Felix, you lost." Ugh. Felix, exhausted, lay sprawled on the garden floor. Zeke was convinced that Felix and Liam would complement each other's shortcomings. Just then, Farrell approached Zeke. "Sir Zeke." "Sir Farrell, what's the matter?" Farrell handed Zeke a note. "What's this?" "It's news from a friend in Atlas." Zeke unfolded the note Farrell gave him and read it. He nodded. "So Raina Draker is also participating in the tournament. Anyone with a purple rank or higher can participate, so it seems the Turin clan hurriedly applied for Raina Draker's participation." Zeke looked at Liam, who was standing behind him, and said, "You heard that, Liam? Raina is participating in the tournament." He then said to Liam, "Liam, you're also entering the tournament. Aim to defeat Raina." Farrell was surprised at those words. "Sir Zeke, Raina Draco is from the Turin clan and a pure-blooded awakened. She's young, but she's one of the strongest contenders." Zeke grinned and said to Liam, "You heard that, Liam? Work even harder." Liam bowed his head to Zeke with a determined look in his eyes. "Understood, master." Felix and Farrell were speechless, staring blankly at Liam as expected of Sir Zeke. His way of thinking is different from ordinary people. "Why did I say I'd be this guy, Squire? I want a turn back time." Thud. 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 The day of the Drake Martial Arts Tournament preliminaries arrived. Young knights and their clan members gathered noisily at the assembly point set up on the outskirts of Atlas. They tried to intimidate each other by waving larger and more colorful flags. As if trying to show off their clan status, it was then thud. Thud. There was a group of horsemen leading enormous war horses, a crest with a giant bull engraved on it. The Turin clan, the most belligerent clan among Draker's blood alliances, known for their strong physiques. In the midst of the Turin clan horsemen, Raina Draker, the genius and pure-blooded awakened, arrived at the assembly point riding a giant warhorse. As she appeared, the horsemen from other clans exchanged glances and held their breath. The pressure emanating from the Turin clan knights, with their massive physiques reminiscent of barbarians, was suffocating. Then, following the Turin clan, carriages and horsemen from another clan entered. Two snakes biting each other's tails formed their crest. It's Siemens. The carriage bearing the Siemens crest stopped, and a young man with ash-gray hair and Sampaku eyes stepped out. He looked around and said, "Humph, a lot of insignificant rabble have gathered." He didn't hesitate to utter arrogant words, but the horsemen from other clans couldn't say anything and just flinched back at the sight of Edward Siemens. Just then, Edward spotted Raina and approached her. "Raina, it's been a while." As Edward approached, the Turin clan knights standing behind Raina became wary. Edward chuckled and said, "Can't you even greet someone? How dare the Turin clan's lackeys glare at a direct descendant of Siemens?" Raina raised her hand and had the knights step back. She bowed her head to Edward in greeting. "It's been a while. It's a shame you bothered to come all the way here, because I'll be taking the championship of this tournament." Raina said to Edward, "Edward, you'd better be careful. I heard that guy is also participating in this tournament." "What? Are you talking back to me?" "Yes." Edward twitched one cheek and glared fiercely. "Who here dares to stop me? You, Raina, who just became a purple rank knight, with just your measly pure-blooded awakening." "It's not me, that guy is." Thud, 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 thud. Just then, a few people rode into the assembly area on horseback. They arrived with only 4 riders, without any clan crests or escorts. The one leading the group dismounted. "Phew, we barely made it in time." Following him, Liam, Felix, and Farrell dismounted as well. Zeke raised his hand and greeted Raina, who was facing Edward. "It's been a while, Raina." Raina's expression hardened as she saw Zeke after 2 years. Edward, seeing Raina's reaction, cracked his neck and approached Zeke. "Huh. So this good-for-nothing with no backing is the guy I should be careful of, huh?" Edward stood in front of Zeke. "Brat, I'm Edward Siemens." Edward leaned closer to Zeke and said, "A worthless piece of trash like you with no backing has no place here. Just scram quietly." It was then thud, 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 thud. A sound that shook the ground could be heard approaching from afar. Chapter 80. It was a group of horsemen of an overwhelming scale. Seeing them, the faces of the other participants, including Edward, turned pale. What's that? There were the insignias of the Agamemnon clan with the golden mask, the Achilles, Hector, and Aegis clans, all influential clans of the central region, and even the Graham clan, the de facto rulers of Fantasia Whoosh. Not just one clan, but a dozen influential clans stood behind Zeke and his party. Edward, who was in front of Zeke, was flustered and speechless. And no way. Although the Draker martial arts tournament was a microcosm of the continent where the power of each clan could be measured, it was unprecedented for so many horsemen to gather at once. The horsemen of each clan stood before Zeke and bowed their heads respectfully. Following the order of Sir Zeke Draker, successor of Agamemnon, the Achilles clan has answered the summons. Following the order of Zeke Draker, successor of Agamemnon, the Hector clan has answered the summons. Following the order of Zeke Draker, successor of Agamemnon, the Aegis clan has answered the summons. Following them, the other clans also reported their summons to Zeke. Finally, the horsemen of the Graham clan, clad in gold-decorated armor, stood before Zeke. For Sir Zeke Draker, benefactor of the Graham clan and eternal friend, Duke Graham has ordered us to escort you during the tournament. He offered Zeke something. Lady Angelina of the Graham clan asked me to convey this handkerchief, imbued with her wishes for your victory. The mention of Angelina Graham caused a stir in the surroundings. Angelina Graham, who had recently made her debut in society, was already considered the most beautiful woman on the continent. Zeke, who received a handkerchief from Angelina Graham, who had almost no contact with the outside world, was the envy of other young knights. Zeke accepted the handkerchief from the captain of the Graham clan's guards, put it in his pocket, and bowed his head in gratitude. Please convey my thanks to His Excellency the Duke, and also tell Lady Angelina that I will surely bring her victory. The horsemen behind Zeke alone were enough to overwhelm an entire knight order. Edward, sweating, retreated to where his horsemen were. He gritted his teeth as he looked at Zeke. Zeke Draker, no matter what you do, you're just a sideshow to my debut. It was then, a dozen figures appeared in front of the assembly area where the participants were gathered, waving the Draker banner. Among those wearing Draker uniforms, someone rode forward on horseback. Everyone fell silent at his appearance. A middle-aged man with a face full of large and small scars. Zeke looked at the man on horseback, the scarred knight, Gareth Draker. Gareth was one of Draker's guardian knights and a red-rank knight, leading the Black Wolf unit, one of Draker's 3 major knight orders. Zeke remembered his face because Gareth had been active on the front lines during the Third Continental War in his past life. However, after Draker was completely incorporated into the Empire, Gareth broke his own sword and went into seclusion to preserve his pride as a knight. He was a man of strong character and pride as a knight. Gareth looked at the gathered people and said, "We will now begin the Draker martial arts tournament preliminaries. Participants, come forward with 1 weapon each." At Gareth's words, the tournament participants stepped forward with the spears they had prepared. Felix, standing behind Zeke, examined the spears the other participants were carrying, although most of them were covered with cloth, making it impossible to see their exact shape. It was clear that they had brought javelins with long shafts. Felix nodded and whispered to Zeke, "Master, as you expected, they seem to have modified their spears for javelin throwing." Just then, Zeke handed Felix something heavy. Felix tilted his head. "What is this, Master?" "It's the weapon you'll be using in the competition." "What? Where am I participating?" Zeke gestured towards the area where the preliminaries would be held. Felix shook his head at those words. "No way. I didn't even apply for the tournament. What are you?" At the same time, Zeke pulled out an application form with Felix's name on it. "Huh." Felix, who had come along thinking it was just an outing, realized only after arriving that he was a participant. Zeke and Liam grabbed Felix, who was trying to escape, and dragged him inside. The horsemen waited outside the stage, and only the participants lined up to prepare for the preliminaries. Just then, a loud noise came from backstage. Rumble. A giant target that looked like a siege weapon was installed in the middle of the stage. The participants tilted their heads as they looked at the target, which was made of several layers of thick steel plates. Did they install that beyond the mountain? Then Gareth spoke. The preliminary event is the strongest thrust. The more steel plates you pierce, the higher your score. Most of the participants were surprised and looked dumbfounded. They had been told that it was a long-distance javelin throw, but the preliminary event had suddenly changed. And no way. The strongest thrust. We can't properly exert force with these javelins. The participants had brought javelins that had been modified to be light and long for throwing long distances. Seeing this, Edward and the participants related to the Seaman's clan grinned. They knew the preliminary event in advance, so they could prepare the appropriate spears. You're all just my stepping stones anyway. Edward whistled and took out the spear he had prepared in advance. It was a modified spear with a heavy shaft made of iron and a sturdy blade. Designed to maximize force, Edward expected an easy victory. It was then, "What's that?" The other participants exclaimed in surprise as they looked towards Zeke and his party. They had also brought spears with heavy shafts and sturdy blades. Just like Edward, what Zeke had asked Catherine for was not a javelin for throwing, but a spear for thrusting. Felix, holding the heavy spear, asked Zeke, "Master, did you know about the preliminary event?" Zeke shook his head at his question. "I just thought those Seaman's bastards wouldn't tell us the preliminary event so easily." Moreover, Zeke had encountered Edward Seaman's in his past life. Edward, with his sadistic personality, preferred to kill enemies by directly wielding a spear rather than throwing it. Zeke didn't think such a person would choose javelin throwing as a preliminary event. He naturally ignored Edward's glare. Gareth raised his hand. "Come forward with your weapons as your names are called." The participants who had prepared javelins for throwing had no choice but to take the spears they had brought and stand in front of the target. Since the qualification for participation was purple rank or higher, everyone could imbue their weapons with aura. However, simply coating a weapon with aura didn't mean it could pierce the steel plates. Thud. As excessive aura was imbued to add strength, the spear shafts often broke instead, and the force couldn't be transferred to the target. The participants who had only practiced throwing for distance couldn't even make a scratch on the target made of solid iron. Hup! Clang! The best they could do was pierce one steel plate, and that was only if the participant had decent aura control. After a while, it was Raina Draker's turn. The spear Raina had prepared was an ordinary one. This was because the Turin clan didn't distinguish between javelins for throwing and spears for thrusting. Raina stood in front of the target with her spear. Then, she channeled her aura wung. A clear, vibrating sound echoed from the spear. She stepped forward powerfully with her front foot and thrust the spear. Crack! The spear, coated with aura, pierced through 4 thick steel plates. Although it was the best result so far, Raina had a dissatisfied expression. Next was Felix's turn. Phew! Felix, standing in front of the target, held the spear with a serious posture. Felix, who had mainly learned traditional swordsmanship, had also been taught spearmanship to a high level by his grandfather. Felix put all his weight into the spear and thrust it deep into the target. Crack. The spear, imbued with aura, pierced through 3.5 steel plates. Ugh! Felix returned to his usual languid posture and slumped down next to Zeke, seemingly drained of energy. It was soon Liam's turn, and he immediately stood in front of the target with his spear. He pierced 3 plates, slightly less than Felix. Seeing that he lost not only to Raina but also to Felix, Liam resolved to train harder. The next participant stepped up. "Is it finally my turn?" Edward Seamans, who had been looking at the others with an arrogant attitude, stood in front of the target with his spear. Humph! A measly steel plate like this. He held the spear and channeled his aura wung. The aura gathered in the spear was so dense that it was visible to the naked eye. It was proof that he was on the verge of being promoted to a blue rank knight. Haoa! With a tremendous shout, Edward thrust his spear into the steel plate. Crack! With a roaring sound, Edward's spear pierced through 6 steel plates. He retrieved his spear and put on an arrogant expression again. "My condition isn't very good. If it were my usual self, I would have pierced all 10 plates." Edward glanced at Zeke, smirked, and returned to his original position. Zeke didn't pay much attention to Edward. He was more concerned about another participant, Ellen Sabrina. While scanning the participants after arriving at the arena, Zeke noticed one participant in particular who stood out. It was a young female knight with her face hidden by a hood and cloak. Just by looking at her breathing, gait, and the aura she exudes, she's no ordinary knight. For a knight with that level of skill, he should have heard of her name at least once. But it was his first time seeing her. Could she be participating in this tournament under an alias? Zeke Draker. Finally, it was Zeke's turn. Zeke took his eyes off the female knight named Ellen and stood up. Then, he took out the spear shaft he had prepared. But something was strange. There's no spearhead? Literally, there was only the shaft. Zeke attached his sword, Bahamut, to the prepared shaft click. There was no problem with the attachment, as it had been specially ordered to be compatible with Bahamut. Edward sneered at the spear Zeke was holding. Kakik, can you even lift that spear properly? Bahamut was a claymore, so it was larger and heavier than ordinary swords, with the shaft attached to Bahamut. It became a long spear that was difficult to even lift properly. As Zeke stood in front of the target, the examiner asked, "Are you sure you want to use that spear?" Zeke nodded and took his stance facing the steel plates. Then he channeled his strength and took the stance of the Dragon Slayer style, Wung. Dragon Slayer style, true dragon sword skill 8th stance, 3rd verse dragon scale, thrust qua 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 qua. With a tremendous roar, Zeke's spear pierced the steel plates. It was surprising that he could execute such a powerful thrust with a heavy and long spear. Moreover, Zeke wasn't even using an aura blade. The examiner counted the number of steel plates Zeke's spear had pierced. All 10 plates have been pierced. Despite the disadvantageous conditions, he had pierced through all the steel plates. Edward had an expression of disbelief, and Raina glared at Zeke with sharp eyes. Zeke shrugged and returned to his seat with Bahamut. The tournament officials removed all the pierced steel plates and replaced them with new ones. Just then, Ellen Sabrina, whom Zeke had been paying attention to, stepped forward. It was her turn, but she wasn't holding a spear in her hand. The examiner asked Ellen, "Where's your spear?" Ellen then drew the sword that was hidden under her cloak. The examiner looked at Ellen and said, "Are you going to thrust with a sword?" It wasn't impossible, but it was certainly disadvantageous compared to using a spear. Generally, swords were weapons for slashing, not thrusting. But then, Ellen suddenly started walking backward instead of towards the target. The examiner, flustered, called out to Ellen, "Ellen Sabrina, are you forfeiting the match?" At that moment, Ellen turned around and threw the sword she was holding towards the target. Crack. The sword pierced the steel plates and embedded itself deeply. The examiner, surprised, checked the steel plates and shouted, "E8 plates pierced." If it had been a spear instead of a sword, it might have pierced all 10 plates like Zeke's. Ellen turned her head, looked towards Zeke, and took off her hood. Zeke was surprised to see her face. It was a face he knew, Helen Draker, the 4th direct descendant of Draker.